Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
Tuesday People's Poll, James. We let the audience decide what we're going to be talking about. And today was a landslide. Quite often, we do get these votes where it just literally becomes a landslide, and it did today. Talk to me.
Yeah, I wasn't convinced that it would be actually, but it has because I know that the topic we're going to talk about, a lot of people just don't want to hear about. As one person said to me when I asked for positive feedback last night, someone said to me, "What kind of people would want to listen to that?" And I said, "Well, the people have fucking voted for it, mate." So there were three topics that were put up for consideration. Schalke's demise in Germany, one win in the Bundesliga this season, just sacked Christian Gross, their fourth manager of the season. Champions League semi-finalists only 10 years ago look likely to drop into Bundesliga 2 this season. Did you just get handed a drink by chance, Serge?
Yeah, I just got handed a bottle by my son who's homeschooling. He's having his lunch and he's quiet as a mouse. He's a good little lad, and he just gave me the bottle and said, "Open this." He didn't even say it, did he?
He also
It's
probably
just,
would have
it's just
been
unwritten.
he probably also would have been quiet for the subject of big game board draws, particularly highlighted over the last few
Yeah,
days because of Manchester United's prolonged run of scoreless games since losing to Tottenham back in early October, where there's only been one goal scored in their meetings with Big Six opposition. But the winner of the vote with 59% of the vote was refereeing standards and the standard of Premier League referees, which feels like it really hit a kind of crescendo moment on Saturday at the Hawthorns. We intentionally didn't talk about that particular moment yesterday on our featured podcast. I think we should talk a little bit about it now and then evolve into a wider conversation about referees. I presume, Suj, that you have seen the incident of Lewis Dunk's
yep.
goal, no goal, goal, no goal.
Well, it was no goal, goal, no goal, right?
Yeah, some order or another. Yeah,
Yeah, it was no goal because well, according to Lewis Dunk, he allowed him to take the free kick. At which point he put the ball away.
yep.
At which point he'd then blown his whistle, so it was no goal. Then he was actually no, it's a goal, and then he was back to no goal. But I mean,
Lee Mason is
when
one
when
of
this when this when this topic won the people's poll, I'm like, do we need to sort out the refereeing standards? I feel like it's a one-word pod. Yes.
See you later, mate.
What
I'll
else
take
needs to
over
be
from here then.
said?
So
What else needs to be said? I mean, yeah.
Lee Mason's not a good referee. Um, Struggles with some of the basics such as playing advantage. He also lets some fairly robust tackles, should we say, go unpunished on some occasions. Nuno Espirito Santo said after defeat at Burnley in December, "I just never want this referee again." Not because of any particular decision in that game. He actually gave Wolves a penalty during that match, but he is just, I don't want this referee. He's not good enough. So when this happened on Saturday, Dunk's obviously asked for permission to have the free kick taken. Mason says, "Yeah, crack on." Mason blows his whistle. Lewis Dunk kicks the ball. There's not really anything to add to that. I think what happens is Lee Mason looks up and goes, "Oh my God, Sam Johnson is standing by his post. He's completely left the goal unguarded. I've not given him a chance to do what he needs to do." Panics, blows the whistle basically at roundabouts the point where the ball is about to cross the line. And actually, VAR, we'll talk about it a little bit, but this is more about referees. VAR makes the only decision that it possibly can, which is to disallow the goal. But it's not VAR's fault. It's all down to the incompetence of the referee. I mean, on that anyway,
The timing of his whistle. Yeah.
why do players have to wait for the referee's whistle? Do they have to wait for the whistle 50 yards from goal? It's like the attacking team gets penalised by saying, "Okay, you've won a free kick, but wait a minute, make sure the defence has all the time that it wants to set up however it wants." That's not how it should work. Lewis Dunk scored a free kick at Anfield last season with exactly the same manner. I think Martin Atkinson was probably the referee. We said, "Look, can I take it?" Adrian's standing by the post. Lewis Dunk just passes it into the other side. And there's a lot of, "Oh, wasn't ready," whatever. That's your problem. Get ready. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on players just being able to take a free kick whenever they want?
Yeah, they should be allowed to. Yeah, they should be. I'm trying to think of reasons and justification for saying it's not fair because players should be allowed to set themselves. If that's going to happen, I think there should be a blanket. This is what we're going to do. Attacking teams can take a free kick straight away. Um, I would like that rule because it will also cut out the time that we have for all this niggly whinging at the referee and stuff.
Yeah.
If you're a player and you get given a foul against you, you're thinking, let me go and moan and whinge at the referee. But if you know in the back of your mind, hang on a second, these lot can take that free kick straight away, I'll better get myself in position. It changes what you're thinking about instead of having a whinge and a moan at the referee. So the more I think about it, the more I like the concept of just let them take it.
If it
It
happens
has
on the
other
halfway
benefits
line,
as
no
well.
one says wait for a whistle or anything, do they? Why? There's literally
No,
nothing.
just carry
There's
on,
literally
don't they?
nothing written on the laws saying, "Oh, because you're 25 yards from goal, you have to wait for a referee's whistle." Now, it might be in certain instances because the referee's obviously got to get his sprayer out for the 10 yards line. If he then makes it clear to everybody at that point, look, I need to go and set this up. Therefore, you can't kick till I've made it clear. Then fine, everybody knows the situation that it's going to be a slower process. But if if Duncan said to Mason, "Can I take it?" and Mason says yes, he's going to take it, isn't he? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The referee has panicked, and what happened was it went from watching it. I was like, "Oh my god, the referee's lost control here. He actually doesn't know what he's doing." It went from anger in the first instance, which I think most people's feeling was, "That's a goal. Let it be a goal." So almost then like apathy with the referee going, this is really uncomfortable to watch, seeing how he doesn't know what he's doing in this moment. And I would like to remove him from the field of play if I could. If you could make a substitution for a referee, I'd have wanted it to be made right there. Just take him out of it because he was all over the place. And that's uncomfortable. And we have to remember that in the first instance. And we often, as football fans, which we are first and foremost, that referees are human beings. And it struck me watching that game on Saturday that I was from being angry, I'd gone for a point was I feel sorry for this guy. And I feel sorry for him. It's his fault that he's made the mistake, but I feel sorry for him what's going on in his head right now because he's not there. He doesn't know what the right decision is. And ironically, it is VAR, as I said in the end, made literally the only call by law that it could. If he'd blown the whistle 1 second later, VAR would have had to say that's a goal.
I get it that these guys are human. I get it, right, and what have you. Yet the decisions they're making, forget the fact that they don't need to be abused, and we don't need to give them all of that stuff online and death threats and all that is nonsense. Why are they not seeing the same things that you and I are seeing? Another great example is the Suj red card against Mitrovic and what have you, and what happened there. Why? What did Mike Dean see that we didn't see? What did Lee Mason see that we didn't see? Because you'd hope that they understand the rules of football better than we do, or the laws of football better than we do. I don't know all the laws of football. I'll be honest with you. Like there's certain nuances that even I don't know. I remember there was the incident in the Spurs West Ham game where Son went down and was fouled, and then he needed treatment. You were telling me that if a foul's given for the team, then the player doesn't need to receive treatment off the pitch, and they can receive it on the pitch or something.
If
like
there's
that.
been a yellow card.
Right. Okay. So see, I don't know all the rules of football. I'll be open and honest about it because they're so convoluted. But you'd hope that the referees know the rules of football better than we do, and you'd hope that they'd see and understand football situations as much as we do because they get discussed. They do training. They have whatever they do as referees, but we don't see that.
So for Mason and Mike Dean, who were obviously VAR and on-field referee for the game between Fulham and West Ham, and were also the same combination for Manchester United
Was Lee Mason the VAR
Southampton.
that day?
Yeah, I'm sure he was. And the same for Manchester United and Southampton with the Bednarek red card. Now, both of these were overturned, and that's where this becomes a little bit concerning. So I'm a heavy critic of VAR But VAR should be there to help aid to come to the right conclusion. We've got two very experienced referees who in two separate incidents have looked at a decision together, decided it's a red card, and then both decisions have got overturned anyway on appeal. So I think anybody with a little bit of human nature to them will understand that in the Thomas Souček situation, he was trying to put his arm away from Mitrovic to be able to make a run beyond him. Very unfortunately, caught him with the point of his elbow en route of trying to lift his arm to get away from him. But they've gone down the law of, well, he's been struck in the face. That's it. It's like they don't have common sense. In the case of the red card against Bednarek, the majority of us have watched that and gone, Anthony Martial is instigating the contact. Now, it's still debatable to a certain extent whether it could still be a penalty because there is some form of contact. And if Mike Dean then decides at that point, okay, well, I still believe there was contact there and Martial didn't initiate it and he sticks with a penalty, I can live with that a little bit. What I can't do then is, again, they've gone down the complete letter of the law by sending him off because he's made no attempt to play the ball. Now, what Bednarek attempted to do was get out of the man's way to avoid bringing him down. It's like there's no common sense in refereeing anymore. In a lot of cases, we have to go by the complete letter of the law. David Luiz red card against Wolves. He has not intentionally fouled William Jose. Jose pulls his foot back to shoot, makes contact with the sole of his boot with David Luiz's knee, and David Luiz gets sent off. It's actually ridiculous. But that's part law of the game is the problem there. Go on, Suj.
Do you think there are more bad decisions now than they were pre-VAR?
I don't know.
Just highlighting.
No, I don't know, because what VAR has done is, and I think it's this, we moved away from refereeing from a little bit of common sense to complete matter of fact. Everything's black or white. It's either yes or no. There is no, okay, I see what's happened there, but in my interpretation as a human being, as a referee knows, okay, like he slipped going into the challenge there. Basic things like that. It's like it's just completely removed. So, but obviously the scrutiny now is much, much more because of part VAR, because every single game is at a different time, that we see all of these incidents under so much more of a magnifier, basically. We see it over and over.
Is really, really the crux of the situation, because I was trying to understand if this refereeing has gotten worse and decisions are made that weren't being made historically, or is it a situation where referees feel like they're under more pressure than they ever have been, which means that they're making decisions with a complete different mindset and mentality. When you're under pressure, you make different decisions than when you're not. But then I was thinking, well, what VAR has allowed, and that this kind of going and looking at the monitor, is more time to make the decision. So if you see something and something happens
and still get it wrong,
historically pre-VAR, they would have made the decision and it is what it is and we move on.
Yep.
Now they actually have more time to make the decision and look at it 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
So if you have more time to make a decision, there should be less pressure on you, because you know you're going to get a chance to actually review it and make the right decision. Yet we're still making wrong decisions. And why is that? And I think you're right. It comes back down to, if I follow the letter of the law, no one can say I've done wrong, because the law is the law.
Yep.
If I use some common sense and interpretation, I could get myself in a situation where people are going to be like, what is going on here? And that's where we're falling into this situation. Do we want referees to follow the letter of the law, or do we want some common sense in our refereeing? Are you happy to let Mike Dean interpret things the way he wants to interpret?
No.
These guys.
And that's
so, yeah.
That's part of the point, isn't it? I mean, if you take those Bednarek and Luiz situations, which were both on the same night, game after game, that I think the majority of us could all say we don't want that to be a red card for those 2 players, Luiz and Bednarek. So on that, that's a law problem in theory, because technically, by law, those were arguably the correct decisions. But then the Bednarek one got overturned, right? I think the reason the Bednarek one got overturned was you couldn't even tell for certain if there was contact, i.e. Martial was already going down before the contact with Bednarek happened. Whereas in the William Jose one, no one's saying he dived against David Luiz. It was the contact with Luiz that meant that he fell over. But Luiz didn't try and pull the ball. I think Luiz was trying to run round him so that if Jose went round Leno, Luiz could get back on the line and attempt to clear the thing. I think that's what was happening in that particular circumstance. But then that comes around full circle in terms of, am I happy for Mike Dean to come to his own common sense decisions? Well, Mike Dean's been a Premier League referee for 20 years, and he's had spells of being a very good referee. He's also had some spells where it feels like it's all about him, and he's happy to be the centre of attention in terms of what he does. The greatest strength of any referee is that you watch a game of football and afterwards you think back and go, who was refereeing that game? I can't even remember.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Those are the best refs, right? But you always know
100%.
that Mike Dean's refereeing, and I always know that Lee Mason's refereeing as well. Unfortunately, to pick on those two particular individuals, I've always been quite a staunch defender of Premier League referees, and my opinion has changed on it going through the years of going to football regularly for 30 years. When I first started going, it was who's the wanker in the blank in the black. Can we have a referee and all that kind of thing? Obviously, referees would get abuse. But then it evolved for me when Tottenham started playing regularly in Europe in the mid to late noughties. And I realised that our referees, in my opinion, were better than overseas referees. Now, one impact to that might have been is the majority of European games that I watched Tottenham play weren't Champions League games. They were UEFA Cup games.
Sure.
So quite often I wasn't seeing the best referees from around Europe. I was seeing the secondary best referees from around Europe, for example. Exactly. But watching European games, it always felt to me like there was more fouls. The games never flowed as much. Therefore, games seemed to be lower scoring, etc. You knew every time someone went down, it was automatically a free kick. And I think as English people, we have that nature, which is different. We've spoken about this before, different to what a lot of other people across Europe believe in terms of we don't mind seeing someone take a rough challenge and stuff like that. We like, as long as it's fair, we like the physicality in our game. The interpretation that people across Europe and other parts of the world is very different on both officiating and VAR compared to the English mentality. Ours is very, very different. So again, I get this all the time in my tweets, like around Europe, VAR is working. It's an English problem. Even Gianni Infantino said that about a year ago. He said the interpretation of VAR has been done incorrectly by the people in England, the PGMOL, and across Europe, it's working fine. And most people feedback to me are quite happy with VAR outside of England. Is this just our problem with A, VAR, and B, obviously refereeing standards? Because I've now, over the last couple of years since VAR has been introduced, I now don't think that our referees are better than what's around in Europe.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I don't have enough experience of the interpretation and utilization of VAR in other European countries to
I
comment.
really thought you was going to say my team playing in European competition, which also would have been correct.
No, I know our interpretation is wrong. Anytime they get the lines out for offsides, I know straight away this is not VAR. What VAR was brought in for? Surely not. And you can, in a funny way, you can see the stupid mistakes that VAR is going to make quite often when they start getting the lines out. You're like, they're going to call that offside for his armpit now, aren't they? And you know how much they're going to cock it up before they even make the cock up nowadays, which is incredible. We need to go somewhere from here. Where? What's the solution? What's the way forward, James? Because we've got some good referees in our league as well. You can't argue with that, and some that do manage games particularly well. So where do we go from here? And the likes of Lee Mason and what have you, they've earned their stripes, right? They've not just suddenly arrived in the Premier League. They've managed for a long time at lots of different levels to work their way up. They can't be bad overnight, surely.
but maybe
It's not been bad at all these levels.
maybe the quality of the official has got worse. He's part of the point. So, I mean, Howard Webb wasn't infallible, right? Howard Webb refereed the 2010 World Cup final, and most people were quite critical of his performance, particularly in terms of like they're not sending off Nigel de Jong, the amount of yellow cards there were in the game. But generally speaking, when you had a Premier League game and Howard Webb was the referee, as long as you weren't playing against Man United, you were generally fine. You were going to get a good refereeing performance. That's a joke about Howard Webb and Man United. But I do recall a very bad Howard Webb decision given for a Manchester United penalty against Tottenham. But at the time, it was such a surprise because generally speaking, his decision-making was 99% correct. Really good. One of the things that really annoys me about VAR and the lines is 98% of the time, the official referees, the assistant referees get the decision right on offside. That's proven. 98% of the calls that they make are correct. That's probably lower now. And this whole playing advantage thing, I absolutely hate, by the way.
Yeah.
When someone's 3-4 yards, there was one last night in the Everton game. Sigurdsson was 3-4 yards offside. And it's like, stop the game. You're wasting 20 seconds of everybody's time here. I don't like that rule, but that's a different matter. Sian Ellis-Massey made a mistake recently in the West Bromwich Albion Man City game when she put her flag up, and I think it was either Cancelo or Bernardo's goal. It wasn't Gundogan's goal. I think it was Cancelo's goal.
Cancelo's goal, yeah.
Where she put the flag up and she should have waited. But I think what happened was, in her mind, she was 100% sure that it was offside. So she thought, unlike that one last night with the Sigurdsson case, I'm going to stick the flag up. I'm absolutely certain he's offside. Now, it's proven on the replay, he was extremely fractionally onside. And the reason it was really shocking with that incident was because Sian's the best assistant referee around. She doesn't make mistakes. But then I think we all recognize that. At the time, we go, do you know what? She's a really good official. And this has shocked me because she doesn't normally make mistakes. We don't normally need VAR when Sian's in charge. Honestly, if Sian's doing the line for the defending team and we score a goal, I feel more comfortable celebrating. And I'm not joking, because I trust her to get the decision right because she's the best around. There was lots of feedback I had last night on Michael Oliver being a very good referee. A lot of people like Andre Marriner. I feel like the pair of them, personally, over the last couple of years have not improved as referees since the introduction of VAR. Michael Oliver, when he started, in my opinion, was someone who looked like he enjoyed the job. He really doesn't look like he enjoys it anymore. I'd like to shout out Chris Kavanagh, who I think is the most improved referee in the league this year. I often don't notice that he's refereeing games. I looked at the statistics, no red cards this year. He's not the only one. Marriner as well, no red cards. Guess who's got the most, Suj?
Mike Dean.
Mike Dean, 7 red cards so far this season.
Didn't even need to
there's some,
guess that.
And that's not to say that Mike Dean shouldn't have sent off some of these players. I can think of Moutinho getting sent off for a second booking in the Wolves Villa game, and you'd think that wasn't necessary, mate. And maybe there's 1 or 2 players that Kavanagh or Marriner should have sent off. But even just looking at bare statistics like that, you think, right, we've got different referees interpreting things in different ways and refereeing games differently, even though they're now fixed on to having to referee games strictly by law. And I think it's because referees like Kavanagh and Marriner do have a little bit of common sense in their refereeing, is why they're better. Marriner made an awful mistake at Leeds last week when he turned his back on the potential Che Adams goal when James Ward-Prowse went to take the free kick. And Marriner turned his back to the play as he went to blow the whistles. Unforgivable. I spoke about it on one of the podcasts we did last week. But generally, he's quite a good referee. Martin Atkinson is another one who people generally like as a referee. I don't, but I accept a lot of other people's opinion that he is generally a good referee. I think what we've got here is refereeing standards are getting worse. I don't think like Oliver and Marriner personally have improved since the introduction of VAR. And I think the pressure of VAR is taking away, ultimately, the common sense allowed for refereeing, where we are having to go by fact. And I don't think it's helping. It's not a particular criticism of VAR. I think this is a psychological issue.
Yeah, I think you've summarised it incredibly well there. And it'd be nice to see them drip feed in a bit more of this common sense related decision making for referees and see what happens. Because at least I think then we can understand where they're coming from. What's your views on referees coming out um, and giving interviews?
I'd be so for that. There was an incident.
Does that not increase the pressure on them?
It does, but it would also help the rest of the world understand that these people are humans, and they are humans. And it is because we have no personal interaction with referees, etc. I don't think we understand. We forget about the human element. If our centre forward misses a chance on goal, he gets blame. But we know the human. We know that he was trying to score. He wasn't missing intentionally. There was a program on Sky about 18 months ago or so ago where Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville went to St George's Park, I think is where they do their training fortnightly, to see what the referees do when they meet up. And from that, you got the human element that these people were real and how difficult it is to make split-second decisions. You got that. Neville and Carragher, I think, walked away from that and went, I've got a different respect for you. I understand how difficult that is. I'd like to see more of that, to understand the process of what goes beyond decision-making. There was an incident, I meant to look up what year this was, so forgive me, I can't remember. It's roughly about 20 years ago. There was a game at Old Trafford between Manchester United and Newcastle. And both teams had, the game ended 0-0. Both teams had goals disallowed. I think Alan Shearer for Newcastle, and I think from memory, Mikel Silvestre for Manchester United. And it was questionable whether either goal should have stood. I think they were like leaning on the back of someone, that kind of thing. And after that game, something very, very rare happened. Paul Durkin, who was quite a good referee, actually, although he missed a blatant Tottenham penalty against Newcastle at Old Trafford in the 1999 FA Cup semi-final. Anyway, he was quite a good referee. He did an interview after the game with Sky, half hour after the final whistle. And he said, these are the reasons why I made my decision. And actually, seeing back, I think it was the Shearer goal, he said, having seen that back, if I'd have been able to see that back, I probably would have given the goal. And everybody went...
Did he get in trouble for doing that?
Well, no one else did it again afterwards. I imagine he probably did. But everybody reacted it and went, all right, well, I can understand why he made the decision. I mean, Newcastle fans weren't particularly happy because the referee's just admitted he should have given them the goal. But he's also saying, I would have given the goal had I seen this replay and seen a different angle of it. And then everybody understands the decision-making process. Lots of us who are on social media will see these videos that keep going around from Australia, particularly, where the referees are mic'd up. And you get to hear the decision-making of what's happening. A lot of people responded to the tweet I sent last night and obviously referenced what happens in rugby and the behavior of players in rugby being very different to football. I think we've spoken about this before. The big fear with miking up referees in football is the players. A lot of people think, referees won't want to hear their conversation heard. I think it's more a fear of actually players. And the fact that players' etiquette is very different to rugby players.
Apologies for if you just heard any foul language there. We get that all the time now.
My personal view on it is it would probably take a little bit while to implement, and it would probably need to be trialed properly, where in the first instance, we couldn't hear the conversation live, possibly for even a whole season till players got used to it. But then afterwards, perhaps we could hear the reasoning of why a referee made a decision, perhaps at half-time or full-time. That gives them time to bleep out the swearing, and it gives players a year's grace to understand, right, if you swear over this mic in a year's time, you're getting sent off. And we slowly phase something in. Because the whole hearing the conversation and understanding why a decision's being made, that's going to help our understanding of what a job is like for a referee, right? At the moment, we feel like... Go on.
I was going to say, I have to have one massive big caveat into any criticism of referees and any disappointment that we have. You were about to say, we feel like we know better. Is that what you were going to say?
Yes.
Or that we don't have an insight into what they're saying?
Both. I don't know which one I was going to say now, but both.
I'd end this podcast with one simple, massive caveat, though, Jace. I couldn't and wouldn't do it, be a referee. As much as I can criticize them, give me the opportunity to be a referee, I just wouldn't do it. And I think primarily because I'd be coming to work on Mondays every week with black eyes, because I couldn't have the patience to put up with people mouthing off. I just couldn't do it. If in a Sunday league or any situation, I couldn't hold my tongue if people were being mouthy or rude or whatever. And it doesn't matter what tier of football you're in, referees get grief from players all day long, play acting and whatever. I wouldn't have the patience to put up with it. I'd lose my rag too easily, and I'd end up causing myself more problems than it's worth. So, with that in mind, as much as I can be critical of them, I have to stand up and hold my hands up and say I couldn't, and wouldn't at a choice do it.
No, I don't think many of us would. That's part of the problem, right? Where's the encouragement for the next?
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Where's the next encouragement for the next generation for referees? We've heard it mentioned for 20 plus years. Why do ex-pros not consider going and being referees? Twist that on its head. Many of them are multi-millionaires. Why would they then go and do that when they've finished playing on far less money, etc., just to get abuse week after week? No. And I think one of the things that we would all agree on in terms of the abuse on field, which often leads to stuff off the pitch and worryingly for incidents at grassroots football, Sunday league football, school football, that kind of thing, has to be nipped in the bud. We saw on Sunday at Stamford Bridge, Cesar Azpilicueta getting far more involved in terms of the reviewing of the VAR incident than what technically should be allowed, right? That should be automatic booking, getting that close and trying to view. Yep. I saw an incident in Spain very recently where Luis Suarez tried the same and he got booked immediately. And it's little things like that. Why isn't that applied? Paul Tierney should see Azpilicueta's there and just turn around and go, "You're booked, mate. Fuck off." So...
And then we get other stuff that is like diving, for example.
Well, like, the law, the law at the moment is aiding diving, because you try and win a penalty, and let's say you get it. So there was Nathan Teller. It's not a good reference point, but obviously won a penalty at Leeds last week. Now, actually, on that one, you couldn't say for certain whether it was a dive or not, because it looks like he kicks out Llorente's leg, but you couldn't actually prove that it was a dive. But there are many cases where we've seen players try and win penalties this year by diving. VAR's reviewed an incident. You can see clearly 100% it's a dive and they don't get booked. Why have we stopped booking players? So we're encouraging players to dive in the penalty box is the reality, to try and initiate the contact and get the VAR appeal, because we know that VAR will review it. And yet when we prove that they've dived, there's no action being taken. That's an incident where we are clearly making referees' job more difficult. Perhaps if there was... What happened to the 2-game ban for getting proven for diving? What happened to it? Where did it go? Why did it leave us? We are scrutinising every moment, but we're not punishing people who clearly cheat. And now every single club in the Premier League has someone who dives, from Anthony Martial to Conor Gallagher to Harry Kane to whomever, right? Every single club has someone who dives, and at the moment the laws of the game are encouraging players to go and dive. Why wouldn't they? There was Sunday night at Bramall Lane, Sadio Mane was really honest trying to go past a Sheffield United player, and he run it out of play. And I'd tell you 100% that if he'd got brought down, he would have won a penalty, and he stayed on his feet. And afterward, Andy Hinchcliffe's on co-commentary going, we have to applaud Mane there for staying on his feet. Why? Because the reality is, by the laws,
the likes of Klopp and what have you, will be like, yeah,
you should have dived.
Wrong.
It's the reality for his team. I mean, it was late in the game; they were 2-0 up. It didn't matter, but technically, we should be encouraging Sadio Mane in that incident to dive, because if he doesn't dive, what I would have loved with that is they looked at that incident and went, "That's a penalty." I would have loved that, But we've got into this mindset of, players have to go down. Thierry Henry tells a famous story from 2006, I think, playing for France against Spain in the World Cup, where he kept getting fouled or pulled back by Puyol. And the referee, Henry said to the referee, why are you not giving anything? And the referee said, because you didn't go down. So the next time Henry come into contact with Puyol, he dived, and France scored from a free kick. And we still, 15 years later from that incident, we're still encouraging this sort of thing. So that would have been great. That would have been such a good statement on Sunday night if they went, yeah, listen, Mane's got swiped a bit there. Okay, the contact wasn't enough for him to go down, but let's give him the credit for trying to stay on his feet and say, actually, he's been fouled there. But we don't look at that. There's so many things within the game, laws, the way referees are using the laws, that is still wrong and still frustrating for many a football fan at the moment. I think the quality of refereeing has gone down quite a lot over the last couple of years. And I think it's the impact of VAR. I'm not blaming VAR. You all know that I'm a heavy critic of it. But there are certain things in VAR lately that's been really good on decisions like penalties, etc. And I'd put my hands up and go, yeah, no one talks about the good things that VAR does, for example. But I think, unfortunately, VAR was introduced to make referees' jobs easier. I think bottom line is it's made it harder.
Excuse me, yeah. And this debate will rumble on. I do think, however, that we will get to a point where refereeing will get back to being a little bit better because the referees do a lot of things that can only lead to positive. They train with the Premier League clubs. They do get feedback from the managers and sit and review their decisions and what have you. It does feel like none of the positive things they do end up with an improvement, but over time, we hope that it will get better and we will see better decision making. Time will tell. The refereeing debate has rumbled on for years, mate, and it just will always.
And we could probably do the same podcast again in 5 or 10 years as a reality. I accept that VAR is not going to go away. There's lots of it that needs to be improved. I mean, one of the things we haven't touched on this podcast, and I don't think it's worth doing now, is the handball rule. Do we know? Do the referees rule? Do any of us understand the interpretation of it at the moment? I mean, I don't mind that where Paul Tierney's not give the Hudson-Odoi a penalty at the weekend, for example, because I don't think it's not a case where every single person that I've spoke to thinks that's a penalty. So that's one where I think he has, ironically, used a little bit of his own opinion in making that decision because he's been advised to give a penalty, basically. And I don't mind that. I think that's okay. He's gone, well, I've looked at it from the different angle now and I still don't believe it's a penalty. But what I would say is one big problem with that incident, I don't think they showed him the right replay. And then he's forced to make a quick decision. He should have looked at it like we did and had 4 or 5 different replays before making his decision. He got 2. I don't think that's right. And that's because there's a pressure now in terms of everybody goes, oh, it takes too long. Yeah, it does. But on a fine line call like that, at least give the referee the same angles that all the rest of us have seen. I mean, that's ridiculous. What's the point in VAR if you don't give the referee the certain angles? I mean, there was one, Fernando Llorente was a Champions League goal, which I think is worth highlighting because it wasn't Premier League referees. But that goal was given at Manchester City in the Champions League quarter-final in 2019. And depending on which angle you looked at, it was either handball or it wasn't. But I don't think the referee ever saw the right angle that would have shown him if it was or it wasn't. So one of the big gripes, and I agree with this, with a lot of people say, when they say it's not necessarily VAR. VAR pisses me off because of the offside stuff and all that, and not losing the emotion of celebrating a goal. That's why I hate VAR. I don't hate VAR getting involved in incidents like the Hudson-Odoi handball. I think that's fine.
Yeah,
or to retrospectively send someone off because you've seen a bad tackle which the referee over missed. I agree. I actually like that aspect of VAR. It's the emotion problem of it that I can't stand, that bothers me.
Always jump on Twitter. Do let us know your thoughts on refereeing, or don't, because we know what they'll be and will only descend into a pool of negativity and negative comments. But if you've got any interesting suggestions on how we can improve refereeing, always worth having that discussion and debate. But yeah, like you said, James, we'll still be having the discussion in 5 or 10 years.
One suggestion might be to replace Mike Riley as the head of PGMOL. Might be a good idea as well, because I'm not sure he's the greatest at his job, and that feeds down to his subordinates.
Everybody else. Patrons, not patrons, listeners. Okay, we record so many pods, James. Now I'm even getting confused. Who's going out to what, where, why, when, and how? But it might be a chance to tell you about our Patreon, patreon.com/Planet FPL. 23 additional podcasts in the month of March. Articles go out on our Patreon channel. You get access to Slack and prize leagues and so much more. Start of the month is a great time to sign up to our Patreon. So why don't you do it? Just shoehorn in our public service announcement there, James.
Why don't you give us your money?
Yeah, exactly. What do we have the rest of the week, James, for anybody that's not caught up on yesterday's main podcast?
Support Patreon if you want to support the content, guys, is the message. Tomorrow, Sky Fantasy Football. Thursday's Clash of the Correspondents, West Ham versus Leeds with Chris Stone and Andy Martin. I'll be streaming on Friday on YouTube in the afternoon, and then again on Saturday morning ahead of deadline, we're now going to go and record Tottenham on Patreon, talk about Gareth Bale in a bit more detail, West Ham's unfortunate defeat at Manchester City, and we'll also be reminiscing a little bit about Glenn Roeder, who unfortunately passed away a few days ago, and so too did Liverpool legend. Was sad to hear this morning Ian St John passed away as well. Sad. Feels like the older we get, the more people leave us. Unfortunately, it's natural part of life, unfortunately, but it's incredibly sad.
Listeners, stay safe wherever you are. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Cue music, please, man child.